Greetings and welcome friends, I'm Ash, and without wasting any time, here are my 9 simple tips to make your first experience with Wizard of Legend 2 all nice and pleasant. Enemies in Wizard of Legend 2 deal a massive amount of damage, and even the most basic ones can very easily end your run. However, all of them have relatively slow and predictable attacks that you can and should dodge. When it's a one-on-one duel, this is relatively simple, but when you're fighting against an entire room, it becomes almost impossible to keep track of everyone. As such, you're going to need to stay mobile at all times in order to keep yourself safe. This way, all of the faraway ranged enemies will miss because they're aiming for where you were a full second ago, and meanwhile, you'll be able to focus your undivided attention on the much closer and much more threatening foes. As for which enemies you should go first, that's something you'll just have to learn as you go. What I can say is that generally, anyone wearing a robe is going to be a lot higher on the priority list than someone chasing you down with an axe. The first is likely to do some magical nonsense that will just cover the entire screen in special effects, while the latter is going to be chasing you down with a melee weapon and as such can be dodged by just staying mobile. The elite enemies and boss fights in Wizard of Legend 2 are very similar to those in Dark Souls. I know this comparison is ridiculously overused and often for completely the wrong reasons, but this time around it really does apply. Those fights are less about you smashing the boss down as quickly as possible and more about you staying as safe as possible. The reason for this is very simple. The bosses do a lot more damage to you than you do to them, so if you trade blows, you're going to kick the bucket a lot sooner than they will. Instead, you're going to need to take a deep breath and relax. Just take it easy. Learn their attack patterns, and then, once the boss has left themselves exposed, that's when you should strike and try to break their stamina bar in order to stun them and leave them completely vulnerable to follow-up attacks. Wizard of Legend 2 has a plethora of traps and pits you can and should use to your advantage. I am aware this sounds like an incredibly obvious and generally kind of useless piece of advice, but the key thing to note is that you should use them a lot more than you're likely going to. The bottomless pits are especially useful since any enemy you chuck down there will perish instantly. It doesn't matter how much health they have or even if they're an elite enemy. If you throw them off the map, they are instantly gone. And since you can often do this with just a little bit of careful positioning and a couple of attacks, it is a trick you should learn well and utilize often. This goes doubly so when you're doing challenging content. For example, the void where the cursed relics reside or the third world that is full of bottomless pits. The enemies you'll find in these locations are all nasty, and it is entirely possible you might struggle against them if your build is even slightly wonky. So just remember, a single boop is all you need to make your problems go away. Your signature spell, which is bound to right-click by default, has 2 different firing modes. The default attack, and a much more powerful variant that happens when your charge bar is full. The question now is, how do you fill your charge bar? Well, the answer is simple. Just use any attack against enemies. There's relics and special enchantments that can help speed things up, but for the most part, it's going to be just you smacking enemies. These charge attacks are incredibly powerful and can frequently wipe out an entire screen's worth of enemies all on their own. And best of all, the vast majority of them make you completely invulnerable while you're casting them. As such, they are an incredibly useful and important tool when tackling difficult rooms, or even simply getting yourself out of trouble. However, they do have 2 problems. If you stop hitting enemies, the charge is going to start to decay. And if you fully charge your bar, it'll also rapidly start to decay in order to encourage you to actually use it. So in order to make the best use out of your charge attacks, you'll need to keep pushing forward through the levels at a fast but steady pace. This might feel intimidating at first, but the faster you go, the more charge attacks you'll be able to pull off, and as a consequence, the safer everything will be overall. So leave the looting and the shopping for when you're fully out of spell juice. All of that stuff will not be going anywhere. I generally don't like telling people how to play the game or which items to pick. But since runes and medallions are buffer resources that are going to be relatively scarce in the early to mid game, I'll share with you a very solid yet somewhat generic loadout, something that fits all builds. For the runes, I would recommend Trial Funds, which lets you start with a nice batch of early gold, as well as Illusionary Offer, which makes shops 30% cheaper. The reason I like this pairing is because they allow you to kickstart your build by going on a big shopping spree as early as the second level, which not only helps power you up, but also gives each run its own unique flavor. As for the medallion, my default was the Medallion of Venture, which increases your damage by 25%, but also reduces your max health by 25%. Needless to say, this is incredibly powerful because getting a bit of extra health is a lot easier than getting damage. And best of all, it works well in literally every single build. So until you feel a bit more at ease with the mechanics, the Medallion of Venture is a very solid one to just slot in and completely forget about. As you adventure around, you'll be given numerous opportunities to not only add new spells to your loadout, but also potentially replace your old ones with fancy new ones. The big question I struggled with here was, how do I know which ones are good? Thankfully, the answer is relatively simple. Spells can be improved in two different ways. Enchantments, which are RPG-style number increases, and variants, which are essentially transformations that give your spells a whole new angle of attack. As such, you'll always want to take the spells that have good enchantments, ideally plus damage of some kind, as well as spells that already come pre-upgraded with a variant. And yes, this applies even if you have to toss away a spell you started your run with. Unless you've actively been working on that spell, pretty much anything with an upgrade will easily overpower it. So don't be afraid to drastically change your build all throughout the run. It will not only make you much stronger, but it'll also expose you to a whole bunch of different spells that might eventually become some of your favorites. As with most roguelikes, the difficulty curve in Wizard of Legend 2 is quite steep. It is very easy to end up in a situation where you're barely treading water and where each fight just slowly whittles your health down until it all ends with an unceremonious 3-second long boss battle. So in order to avoid this kind of grisly fate, I would encourage you to take some risks in the early game. Even if you're not confident in your build, or even if you know the fight ahead might end up being a complete disaster, I would still recommend you go for it because the upside is a lot bigger than the downside. If you win, you'll power yourself up and give yourself a much better chance to actually complete the entire run. And if you fail, then you would have been ground into the dirt in the next 5 to 10 minutes anyway, so you might as well try, and if you fail, just restart and go again. Most importantly, by constantly challenging yourself, you'll also improve your skills much faster than if you simply played it safe. So don't worry so much about failing and just throw yourself into the wolf's den at any opportunity. Trust me, it is worth it. While Wizard of Legend 2 rewards you for stacking damage and chewing through enemies as quickly as possible, it is also important to build at least one layer of defense by the time you reach the final third of the game. The enemies there are numerous, nasty, and have a plethora of hard-to-dodge attacks that will, once again, slowly whittle you down into nothingness before you even reach the final boss. The good news is that there are plenty of different answers to this conundrum. You can find a way to allow yourself to heal while in combat. Purchase a variety of relics that directly boost your defenses. Supercharge your signature spell and spend most of the fight invulnerable. Or, most simply of all, just get some crowd control spells to keep the enemies nice and still while you deal with them one by one. Since this is a roguelike, you'll never be able to control which items, relics, or spells you'll end up seeing. So do make sure to take whatever defensive options present themselves, even if they're not your favorites. Whatever you do, just don't lose a run because you're chasing that perfect relic that may or may not ever appear. The final and definitely most important piece of advice is to experiment. Once you find a build, or even a couple of spells that work for you, it's going to be very tempting to play those over and over again. And believe me, I get it. I struggle with this as well. But you need to resist that urge. Not only because using the same spells over and over again will get boring, but also because once again, trying to force builds in a game with this much randomness is nearly impossible. Chances are, all you're gonna do is fail run after run after run until finally you get the same ingredients once again. And honestly, that is a very boring way of playing the game. Instead, try to utilize the entire arsenal of spells, especially if you find them upgraded out in the wild. Start every run with at least a couple of different spells, because you might just find that there is a lot more synergy between them than what might appear at first glance. And this goes doubly so when you consider just how much variance can change a spell's original function. So yeah, keep yourself flexible and you'll find the game a lot more enjoyable. And there you have it, 9 simple tips that will hopefully make your first few runs through Wizard of Legend 2 as nice and as pleasant as possible. And if you're curious about what exactly I think about Wizard of Legend 2 as a whole, as well as what its flaws may be, I have also released an in-depth review. You can check it out in the links found above or below. Thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed this, or even if you didn't, please do let me know. If you'd like to see more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, ring the stupid bell, pet your favorite robe, and do whatever other nonsense you gotta do these days. Thank you for listening to me ramble, and I do hope to see you again soon. Bye bye!